Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over three potential hurricanes out in the eastern Atlantic. We currently have one that has a 90% chance of developing, one that has a 70% chance of developing, and one that has a 10% chance of developing. And then we even have one that's coming off the mainland of Africa and it's going to come onto the Atlantic in just a couple of days. And that one looks like it could really strengthen into something really big. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more in today's video, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. So let's get right into it here with your National Weather Service page. We have fire weather watches in effect for parts of Washington and Oregon, as well as parts of California, Nevada, and Utah. We also have some red flag warnings in effect for parts of Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, into Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota, and even into North Dakota, and even into parts of Montana, and kind of in this region of Montana. We actually have some winter storm watches underneath the red flag warning because of that snowstorm that I talked about in yesterday's video. So here is some heat advisories over parts of northern Florida, southernmost Alabama, and southernmost Mississippi, as well as the southern half of Louisiana. We also have some heat advisories for parts of Oregon, California, and Nevada, and also some excessive heat warnings for parts of Nevada, Arizona, and into California there. So other than the fire danger and the excessive heat, we don't have too much going on in the United States. Now, here is the 5-day graphical outlook from the National Hurricane Center. We have these three systems over in the southeastern or the in the northern Gulf of the northern Atlantic here, and kind of on the southeastern portion of your screen. We also have Tropical Depression Omar, which right now is dealing with some really strong shear, and that is really going to tear apart the system. Not really a factor in anybody's forecast, really. So here is currently the 2-day graphical outlook for, I believe this would be Invest 91L here. Again, this only has a 10% chance of developing, so we're not looking at a major threat out of this one. And here we also have another 10% chance in the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook for this one. Now, here is the 2-day graphical outlook from for the I believe this is Invest 92L here, and this again has a 50% chance of developing within the next 2 days. Within the next 5 days, a 90% chance of developing within that red shaded area. And then here is the 5-day graphical outlook for Disturbance 3, currently not in Invest, but most likely within the next few hours and probably by tomorrow we'll have some sort of circulation, and they'll name this Invest 93L. The disturbance number 2, that is Invest 92L. So we currently have 2 invests and 1 disturbance out in the eastern Atlantic. Now let's start looking at the overall infrared satellite for the eastern Atlantic, and looking especially off the coast of Africa. We currently have that is Invest 92L right here, Invest 91L right here, and then we have the third disturbance moving off of Africa, and then we have even larger disturbances moving off of Western Africa, and it's still over the Saharan desert, but it's going to be moving to the west and out within the next few days. Now, here is Invest 91L here. Currently has maximum sustained winds of about 25 knots with a minimum pressure of about 1008 millibars. Now, it's currently located at 11 degrees north by about 37.5 degrees west. Now, here is the model track guidance for the storm. There's no real land masses to compare this to, but it will be making a northeasterly turn, and then it should kind of turn further to the west and start making a northwesterly track, and it might actually start to strengthen as it starts to get into the latter phases of its track. Now, here is the model intensity guidance for the storm. Most of these models have this staying as a tropical depression, but we could definitely get a tropical storm out of this. 2 of the 5 models do have this as a tropical storm as of right now. Now, here is Invest 92L and how it looks on the infrared satellite. Currently has maximum sustained winds of about 25 knots with a minimum pressure of about 1009 millibars, currently located at 17.5 degrees north by about 31 degrees west. Now, here's the model track guidance for the storm, and most of these models have this tracking pretty much straight to the west, and this will not be impacting any land masses in the short term, but longer term, we are eyeing this storm to potentially impact parts of the eastern United States or parts of the Caribbean. We'll still have to see exactly where the storm will track, and that'll really depend who gets affected the most out of this storm. Now, here is the model intensity guidance out of this, and most of these models, actually all of these models, bring this to at least tropical storm status, and a few models are kind of curving this upward into the later term of this model track or this model intensity guidance. So you see, most of these would actually probably bring this to a Category 1 hurricane if it were to continue, and if the model run were to go longer. So these model runs only go out 7 days, so we don't know what happens later on. Some have this strengthening into a hurricane faster than others, but I'm assuming most of these models, if you were to bring them out a couple more days, would bring this to a hurricane at some point. Now, here is the current environmental conditions, and then we'll look at a model guidance, some model guidance for the storm and exactly where these storms will track. Now, we have warmer than normal sea surface temperatures for the entire Atlantic for the most part. So sea surface temperatures really not an issue for this storm. Here are the actual temperatures in Celsius, and you see anywhere in these yellows that's above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Anywhere in the yellows, the oranges, the reds, the pinks, that's above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that is where you could see a sustainable, sustainably warm temperatures for a storm. So a storm could survive in these yellow, orange, or red areas. Once you get into the greens and the blues, that's where it starts to get a little bit colder. Now, here's your wind shear for this storm and where it's going to be tracking. Now, we do have a little bit of an opening of wind shear right along where these storms are located. You see that storm that had about a 10% chance of developing, that is further down here, and that is actually engulfed in some westerly shear, and that's really going to tilt this storm. Now, basically what wind shear is, it's winds changing with height, and that can really tilt a system. So if a system is tilted, then it's not symmetrical, and hurricanes tend to be, or tend to like to be, very symmetrical. That's why you see very major hurricanes not in a very wind shear prone environment, and they're very symmetrical. That's how you start to get an eye wall to build, and that's how you can really intensify these systems. You do see that off to the west we do have a little bit of wind shear, but there is definitely a pathway for this to go through and not really get impacted too much by the wind shear. There is not an immense amount of wind shear that would be impossible for some sort of storm to go through. Now, here is the relative humidity at a few thousand feet up in the atmosphere, and this is showing you generally an overall profile of the atmosphere and how dry or moist it is. Now, we do have very dry air all throughout pretty much the central Atlantic here, and then over to the eastern Atlantic where all these storms are forming, very, very moist conditions, and that's not something we see too often, and that's why we're seeing so many storms just ramping up. Now, if this dry air can really pull away further to the north, then we really won't have an issue with this. But if these storms are kind of going into the dry air and the dry air is kind of looping in on the backside and infiltrating the eye wall, then we could definitely have some pretty big issues with this dry air. Now, let's start getting into the European models cyclonic relative vorticity forecast. Now, this is basically showing you the spin in the atmosphere, and the more intense shades of green, yellow, and orange, and even red there are indicating extreme amounts of spin, and that really, when you see a lot of spin, is where you're seeing a hurricane, and now, or some sort of tropical system. Now, we do have a couple of these systems currently out in the Atlantic, that 10% area right here, Invest 91L, Invest 92L right here, and then we have Disturbance 3 off in westernmost Africa. Now, I'm going to play this through a little bit. This would be by Sunday evening, and we're seeing these systems start to move along. We did see that Invest 91L did already die out, so we don't have Invest 91L anymore, but we most likely will have Invest 93L by this point and 92L. And you're going to start to see on the eastern side of your screen, or the right hand side of your screen, you're going to start to see something develop off the western edge of Africa. Now, here would be by Monday night, and we're starting to see it's moving westward and also rapidly intensifying as it moves westward. Now, it really starts to really get going, and I'm eyeing this one, potential Invest 93L off the African coast. This one is the one that's further to the east, and I really think this one has the better chance out of the two of developing right now. And now, as we continue to move on, here would be by Wednesday night, and we're seeing it's starting to move northeast of the Caribbean. And as we continue, here would be by Thursday night, and then into Saturday night, we're starting to see, and I'll actually push this back a little bit. You start to see this would be by Wednesday night. You're starting to see that system move off of Africa, and that's a system that really has a lot of potential as it's spanning the entire Atlantic as it moves westward. Now you start to see this system really starts to move westward and develop. All of these systems by this point are decently formed, and most likely all of them are tropical storms by this would be by Friday night, and then here would be by Saturday night, and then into Monday, or this would be by Sunday night by this point. And you can kind of tell if this ridge that's currently over here stays and we get this trough to move throughout the eastern United States, you have a funnel for these storms to kind of move right in here. And that's what we saw with Tropical Storm Faye and Hurricane Isaias. So that's really something that we have to pay attention to. We do have a lot of troughiness throughout much of the central United States right now, and we have ridging out in the Atlantic. So if those two can if this troughing can move eastward and the ridging can move westward, we could definitely have a pretty bad scenario on our hands. Now, this would be the final frame of this model run. It doesn't go far enough out, but we can still see both of these storms fairly well defined, and they both look very, very intense. Now, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.